James Armistead Lafayette, a double spy. It was at the peak of the American Revolutionary War that James Armistead walked into the enemy camp as a runaway slave, pretending to be lost in the local terrain. But behind this harmless stroll into the British camp, he had a simple motive: to infiltrate the British stronghold and gain the trust of the British general, Charles Cornwallis. James Armistead wasn't particularly large or striking. Nothing about him drew attention. Before the war, he had been an enslaved man until he was permitted by his master, William Armistead, to join the revolutionary cause as a double agent under Marquis de Lafayette. In James Armistead's few months in the military camp, General Lafayette quickly recognized his unique potential. Instead of assigning him as a laborer, Lafayette chose to use him as a spy because of his composure and intelligence. So when James Armistead entered the British camp, he was dismissed and assigned the role of an errand boy. It was a huge mistake by the British Army. Every morning, he moved freely around the camp, quietly documenting troop movements, eavesdropping on supply discussions, and gathering critical details about strategic plans, all of which he secretly passed to the American forces. On the night before the British evacuation to Yorktown in 1781, Armistead was cleaning the general's tent as usual, all while gathering intelligence about the impending movement scheduled for the following morning. What he did next was crucial. He sent a detailed dispatch to Lafayette, outlining British troop movements, the number of soldiers, and their positions during the evacuation. Acting on this intelligence, the American and French forces launched a coordinated siege by land and sea, trapping Cornwallis at Yorktown. This decisive victory not only crushed the British Army, but also led to the end of the war, formally concluded with the Treaty of Paris on September 3, 1783, ultimately securing American independence. Sybil Ludington, the female Paul Revere. On the night of April 26, 1777, 16-year-old Sybil Ludington performed a feat that few could have imagined. She rode on horseback for 40 miles through dark woods, armed with nothing but a stick, daring both the wilderness and the threat of ambush by loyalist raiders, to alert her father, Henry Ludington's troop, that the British were burning nearby Danbury, and to rally his troops to stop their advance. It was during the height of the American Revolutionary War, a time when it seemed increasingly likely that the British forces were gaining the upper hand, with their repeated burning of villages and attacks on American forces. One night, a messenger in the Danbury, Connecticut military depot suspected that British forces, led by William Tryon, had landed in the town. Within minutes, the British Army began killing and injuring townspeople and set fire to the Continental Army's supply depot. As the attack unfolded, the messenger rode to Sybil's father's home. However, upon arriving the house in Dutchess County, New York, he was exhausted and unable to continue his journey to warn nearby militia units about the attack on their depot in Danbury. Without hesitation, Sybil volunteered to ride through the night in his place. She mounted her favorite horse, carrying only a stick to help navigate the rough terrain and to defend herself against the cowboys, who at that time were one of the loyalist raiders who roamed the woods, ambushing anyone supporting the American cause. Through heavy rain and darkness, Sybil rode nearly 40 miles, relying on her courage, her horse, and her knowledge of the land. She traveled across New York's Putnam County, alerting her father's scattered troops and calling them to assemble and prepare a strategy to confront the advancing British forces. By morning, the entire regiment of about 400 men had gathered in response to Sybil's warning. Although their march into Connecticut came too late to save Danbury, they were able to engage the British Army in one of the fiercest battles of the war, the Battle of Ridgefield, which helped force a British retreat. Thaddeus Kosciuszko, a Polish engineer. Andrzej Tadeusz Bonaventura Kosciuszko woke up one morning and decided that, instead of leveling the hills and filling the rivers with sand, the American Revolutionary regiments could fortify them and use them to their advantage against the British Army. Tadeusz was born in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and trained at the Royal Military Academy in Warsaw and in Paris. But due to protracted military politics in the Polish army, as well as his failed romance with a nobleman's daughter, he was blocked from attaining a high-ranking military career. So instead, he sailed off to America in 1776, the land of the free, arriving in Philadelphia with little more than a letter of recommendation and a vast knowledge of poliorcetics, the art of siege warfare and fortification. On his first day in America, Tadeusz walked up to the military establishment and offered his service to the American cause during the war, and Congress immediately appointed him as a colonel engineer in October 1776. Immediately after his appointment, he was shipped off to the front line, where he was tasked with the responsibility of creating a sophisticated system of redoubts and breastworks that would hold back the British Army's advance. Thaddeus understood the uphill task he had been entrusted with, and his first move was to convince the war generals to see hills and rivers as force multipliers, natural defenses they could effectively fortify against the British Army. He laid out his plan to build American military defenses along the Delaware River, and to improve the fortifications at Fort Ticonderoga. Thaddeus's ingenious defenses proved crucial in the ensuing Battle of Saratoga in 1777, where the British Army was unable to break the American lines, ultimately forcing General Burgoyne to surrender. Thaddeus's exploits earned him recognition from American Revolutionary War generals like George Washington, who also entrusted Kosciuszko with the fortification of West Point. Thaddeus completed this project and topped it off with the famous Great Chain stretched across the Hudson River, preventing British ships from sailing north. Deborah Sampson. It was in 1782, during one of the most precarious moments of the American Revolutionary War, that Deborah decided to cut her hair and wear men's clothes, so she could enlist as a man under the alias Robert Shirtliff in the 4th Massachusetts Regiment of the Continental Army. This was an extraordinary feat that was almost unheard of during the 18th century, but Deborah went ahead with her full enlistment in the military. A few months after her enlistment, the commanding general of her regiment, George Webb, noticed her bravery and decided to assign her several dangerous missions, including spying on British forces and attacking breakaway opposition units. Deborah Sampson embraced the role and worked her way into the elite light infantry unit. In one of the most memorable battles near Tarrytown, Deborah was shot in the thigh. Instead of submitting herself for medical treatment, she demanded a penknife and a sewing needle, which she used to operate on herself. She continued fighting, with a second bullet still lodged in her left thigh for the rest of her life. Everyone on the battlefield witnessed this moment of heroism, but unbeknownst to Deborah, a curious doctor, Barnabas Binney, began to closely observe why she refused all medical care and chose to treat herself. Then, in late 1783, during another battle, Deborah was hit again and immediately fell unconscious. Dr. Barnabas rushed to her side and took her to the hospital. While there, he suspected something was amiss from her posture and how tightly her uniform was worn against her body. When he began treating her, he uncovered the truth about her identity. However, he chose to keep the discovery to himself and later helped her secure a full, honorable discharge from the military. Benjamin Tallmadge. While the Continental Army was riddled with crude and unprofessional spying in 1776, Benjamin Tallmadge, a Yale-educated schoolteacher, walked up to George Washington's tent and offered to organize America's first intelligence network. This was seen as a bold and daunting task because throughout the American Revolutionary War, the American Army had fallen prey to an unclear spy network and poor intelligence gathering. But Tallmadge had a plan. Inside the tent, George Washington watched in awe as Tallmadge laid out his strategy to create a group of operatives primarily in New York City and Setauket. In Tallmadge's mind that day, the plan was simple, as he proceeded to recruit tradesmen and women across New York City to join his spy network, with strict guidelines, starting with invisible ink and complex codebooks where numbers represented specific people. This group would later be called the Culper Spy Ring. Tallmadge decided to lead by example, as he drafted his childhood friends into the ranks, and each of them was given specific code names and pseudonyms, including Abraham Woodhull, who became Samuel Culper Sr., and Robert Townsend, who became Samuel Culper Jr. Tallmadge himself went by the alias John Bolton. Tallmadge created a courier method that triangulated communication within the spy ring. One of his friends, Austin Rowe, would travel from Setauket to New York City to gather information and pass it to Woodhull, who would hide it. Caleb Brewster would then retrieve the messages by boat and deliver them to Tallmadge, who would decode them and pass them to Washington. This method of information sharing was so effective that it helped foil the planned attack on Rhode Island and, most importantly, exposed Benedict Arnold's treasonous plot. And just like that, we have brought to you the most daring but hidden heroes of American Revolutionary War. From Armistead to network like the Culper spy rings, these heroes fought in silence so a nation could one day speak freely. And 250 years later, as we look back on 1776, maybe the question isn't just how America was won, but who we forgot along the way. Because freedom wasn't just built by the famous, it was carried on the backs of the unseen. If you like this video, kindly like, subscribe, and comment with other forgotten heroes you want us to talk about.